Okay, recorder's on. Anytime you're ready, go for it.
Okay. All right. This is Risa August from risaaugust.com, and you are listening to Vroom Vroom Veer with the Jeff Smith. Oh, sorry, I goofed up. Can I start again?
You can. The Jeff Smith. I like it.
I was going to say the fabulous Jeff Smith. So,
Please.
okay. This is Risa August from risaaugust.com, and you are listening to Vroom Vroom Veer with the fabulous Jeff Smith, reminding you that you can live life fully unleashed.
Well done. I'm feeling it.
Thank you. Thank
I'm
you.
feeling the vibes and the sparkles. Okay, let me hit stop. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Are you ready to thoughtfully steer away from your revved up, frenzied, and far too often scripted life? Then welcome to Vroom Vroom Veer with Jeff Smith, where he guides you down the road differently traveled by sharing unique experiences with guests who have managed to shift away from a life stuck on cruise control and veered their way into a more authentic and fulfilling one in all sorts of interesting and kind of remarkable ways. Get ready to Vroom Vroom Veer with your differently traveled road chauffeur, Jeff Smith.
Viral Gor, aka Virus the Poet. Welcome to Vroom Vroom Veer. How's it going?
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's going good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm feeling good. I didn't have any beer for like at least a day. So that's good.
It's still early. It's still early. A lot of time.
Well said. So
Yeah.
you are at virusthepoet.com. So talk a little bit about what you're most excited about in your website, your business today.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I released the book, Poetry is Motion, Mind, Body, and Soul. I released it last year. I have an album on Spotify as well that kind of aligns itself with the book. It's not exactly what's in the book, but it's similar. And yeah, no, I'm just excited about releasing poetry and releasing thought-provoking pieces that help the audience, whether they're listening, watching, or reading it, entice their mindset and their vision of what they want to achieve in their life, or if they're going through some tough times,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
just to really, at the end of the day, to help people. And the overlying theme of the book is relatability. So at some point in your life,
Nice.
for the lives of those that you know, they've gone through a lot of the topics that I'm talking about in this book, which is poetry is motion, mind, body, and soul. And so I think that's the what I'm most excited about.
You're hitting up on some universal themes, right? So
Yeah,
love,
exactly.
loss, right? Relatability. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Relationships, self-reflection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Life, life comes at you hard. And
It
so
does.
you
It
got to
does.
be ready from time to time. And even when you're not ready, you got to get ready. So that's the tough thing.
There you go. So you weren't always a poet. Well, maybe you were,
Oh,
but maybe not. So you grew up in Toronto, right? What was it like growing up in Toronto? What's Toronto
yeah.
like?
Yeah, Toronto's great. It's a melting pot of diversity. So you got a lot of people from all different walks of life, all different ethnicities and races and
Nice.
ethnic backgrounds. And I grew up with a lot of different perspectives. And so through my journey of growing up in the city, and having experiences with different people and different situations that you go across, you just build character, right? And you build these
Totally.
traits yourself. And it was great. No, Toronto's awesome. They call it the six. And
The
so
six. Talk
I love
about
it here.
what's the six about?
It's a phrase. I think Drake coined it.
Okay.
But me, because I'm old school, I call it the dot. That's where we grew up.
The
Yeah,
dot.
T dot O dot T dot O dot. So
Okay. Wow.
yeah, no, Toronto's great growing up. Of course, you go through different times and struggles, but now there's such a magnifying glass on Toronto, and I think that shines more light on the talent in the city, and we have such an immense amount of talent, and it's just
Wow.
trying to find your way through that, and you gotta figure out your life through your journey.
Totally. So did you like start writing like really young, or is this something that you took up
No,
like later
yeah,
on?
yeah, it's a good question. So I did, my first introduction to poetry was probably like grade nine English class.
Wow.
And
Okay.
then, yeah, and then
Yeah.
I never really thought about it. I did it as an assignment. And then when I went to college, I went to Ryerson University, and I was taking the bus. It was about an hour and 15. one way. And I had the old school BlackBerry with the side scroll. Do you remember that one?
Yes.
The
Oh
blue
my
one?
goodness. I just saw a
Yeah,
documentary all about Blackberries and how they
right, right.
dominated forever until the
Yeah,
iPhone killed it.
exactly. So I had that phone, and
Yeah.
there was not much to do on that phone except the memo pad, maybe brick breaker, and in the
Right.
subway, there's no connection to the subway. So I found myself just kind of writing, listening to some music, and just putting down thoughts to the pad, and lo and behold, some poetry came out of it. You know?
Wow. Wow. So that was while you were in college then was kind of like
Yeah, yeah,
when it
exactly.
started. Okay. All right.
That's when it started to kind of manifest and brew a little bit. And as the years, I started writing more and more, got more comfortable with it, got better at it, as you do anything you practice for a
Sure.
long time. And then in about 2015 is when I decided to do it professionally, when
Wow.
I started doing performances and put out content. And yeah, it's been great. It's been a great journey for me, just from a self-reflection standpoint, because
Right.
poetry for me is very therapeutic. But also, when I learned that people gravitate towards it, or they liked it, or it did something for them internally, that's
Mm.
when I was really like, okay, I have something here. Not only is it a passion of mine, but it's also helping. It's making a positive impact on people that I know, and some that I don't even know. I've never even met, and from
Right.
afar I'm reaching them, and so that's what kept me.
One of my favorite quotes uh, was from, have you ever heard of Mel Brooks? He like
Yep.
yeah, the old dude, like
Yeah.
Blazing Saddles and right. Yeah,
Sure.
he did like he had this quote about how like you have to have a message. The message
Yeah.
is the thing. That you got to
Yep.
have a message.
Yep.
Never let them know you have a message. Right?
It's a unique way
You
of
have
saying
to
it. Yeah.
hide the message, right? And I think
Yeah.
poetry more than any other art form is like what you're saying. Like you got to leave stuff out or make things a little ambiguous, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think
And I always
that's the
think,
thing that like attracts people because it's not on the nose. It's like, what the hell is he talking about? Right? Sometimes it's making you think. Yeah.
yeah, sometimes it makes you think, and that's kind of what my pieces do, right? I always want to be the poet that gives you some sort of insight into your own psyche,
Yeah.
provides you a piece of motivation, gets you thinking, right? It's really thought-provoking pieces. And that's why I say, to your point, don't just listen to the lines, read between them, because
Totally.
in poetry, I'm very cognizant of not drawing out like an essay or a lecture. It's more of a
Right.
quick one pager, a few lines, maybe a paragraph or two, maybe. And it's really quick pitch, but it's supposed to incite some sort of thought that's going to get you thinking and
Right.
read between those lines, like you
Right.
said.
Right. Right.
So, and I do leave it kind of open in the air so that it's up for interpretation. When I
Totally.
write, what I'm thinking about could be totally different than what you're thinking about when you read it
Right.
and
And that's the
watch.
way it should be. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
one definition of art to me.
Yes.
So
Yeah. Exactly.
I'm a real big fan of David Lynch. Have you ever watched any David Lynch movies? They're
I don't think
super,
maybe.
super weird shit. But you as an artist, you would love it, I think.
Okay. Okay. Cool.
Because
Yeah. No.
like if you just like most of it is like unwatchably weird. But
Okay.
there's this show from the 90s called Twin Peaks
Okay.
and he was heavily involved in Twin Peaks. So the
Yeah.
thing about it is you'll nail him down, right? And people will
Sure.
say, "What did you mean when you did this?" And he'll go, "Well, I built this chair." Right. And when you build a chair, you got to get all the pieces together. Right. And he'll never, ever answer the question about what is the art about.
Yeah.
the
Like a
art is
politician.
the art is the art. Well, yeah, but you kind of want the politician to answer the question.
No, that's true. That's the difference in the art. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Definitely do.
yeah.
But they're artists in their own right, because they definitely get out of answering a lot of the questions that are direct.
Of course, they're artistry of some sort. We don't know what.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. That's a
Okay,
whole different conversation.
it is. It
Yeah.
is, and I appreciate everyone. So even the people that we don't like, that's okay. It's easy to like the people you get along with.
Yeah, it's always interesting if you really can tell about a person's psyche when they treat those that can't do anything for them. Let's see how they treat those type of people.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, you
Totally.
know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
I had a job in the Air Force, and I was sort of like in charge of the computer shop, network shop. So if you wanted anything like a favor, or maybe like, maybe you want to get on top of the help desk list and get your
sure.
project taken care of first, it wasn't a bad idea to bring pizza and cookies, right? Not like that was expected, but
Yeah,
it didn't hurt, right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I,
It's always something.
yeah, but there was this one major who will go unnamed, right? As soon as I took off my uniform, had a new job, not in charge of that shop anymore, she would not even acknowledge my existence.
Yeah, yeah, I've had that experience before. It's terrible.
Not really. Not really. I was just like, I had that moment of, wow, holy cow, she's really good at actress. She's a really
Yeah,
good actress.
that's a good point.
And now I know more about her. Okay.
Yes, yeah. One thing I think is a good thing to learn is that you have to trust people to be themselves, and
Exactly.
you have to place them where they present themselves to be. And a lot of times, you kind of idolize people or you romanticize situations,
Totally. Yeah.
and you have to kind of bring yourself back and be like, wait, let me put this person exactly who they showed me to that they are,
Yes.
and that I gotta move accordingly.
Totally. And I
Yeah.
think like before we started the show, you said the thing, let's just be authentic, right? I've noticed that like being as authentic as I can does two things. It's like the people that I want more of that are also being authentic and seeking out that vibe of I'm just me, I know what I know. I'm just a dude, right? Here I am.
Right.
Let's talk, right? I don't really have an agenda. I don't want your money,
Yeah,
let's
exactly.
just chat, right? So
Yeah,
that does two things. It attracts people that are in that vibe,
sure.
and then the people that aren't run away.
No, it's true. It's very true. But
Yeah.
the ones that run away, it's probably a good thing that run away. They did you a favor,
Well,
you know?
yeah. I mean, I think they just know, like, okay, I can't get in there. There's nothing. I got nothing to work with.
Yeah.
Right.
That's always it's always tricky to get through that door. I
Right.
mean, it's also what's the purpose of that door, right? Do you really
Right.
want to interact with those people? Do you need to interact? Because that's two different things. Wanting and needing.
Right.
It's two different things, and sometimes you do gotta bite your tongue a little bit. Sometimes it's a
Sure.
different situation, but other times you're like, hey, I'm me, I'm authentic, and
Right.
you're just not everyone is meant for everyone, so you're not gonna
Right.
gel with them. And that's all right,
I'm okay with engaging with people like that. That's
Yeah,
okay. Because
for
if
sure.
we don't engage, then nothing's going to change.
I always
Right.
say having a conversation is equally the easiest and hardest thing to do.
Right.
Because if they're open to it, a conversation can solve a lot of things.
Mm.
If it's something that they're not open to, then it's gonna be one of the hardest things you ever had to do because it's
Yeah.
like pulling teeth, you know?
Sometimes you need to go into that like deep spiritual listen mode. I
Hmm.
heard this story about this like there was an endlessly racist dude, right? Just
Okay.
like really, really racist to his core, right? And this
Right.
black guy was like, okay, I want to talk to this guy, right?
Yeah.
And
Sure.
and he just was like, okay, all right, I get it. You hate black people. Let's talk, right? Instead of running the other way, right? He was
Yeah.
just like, let's
Yeah.
engage, right? And he
Yeah.
listened
Yeah.
to that guy. He listened like that racist person had never been
Sure.
listened to before, and he got some
Mm.
change. He moved him off his spot.
Got
If
you.
you don't
Yeah.
engage with the enemy, quote unquote,
Sure. Sure.
nothing's
Sure.
going to change. Anyway,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good point.
Let's talk a little bit about like your decision. I know like the big movement or the big moment was the poem Home.
Yeah.
So let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit about what was the superhero origin story of Home and Viral Gore and this whole story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always been a self-reflective person. I've always gravitated towards even like I remember going to like a library or a bookstore, and the first thing I would gravitate toward is more self-help books.
Right.
And so
Me too.
yeah, just in that, I found myself kind of being introspective and dissecting, my life and things that are going around in and around me. And so with home, it was more of a piece of just dissecting what was happening internally within the house, within your family. And I think a lot of people can relate to that because, and I just had a conversation the other day about someone that, they don't get along with their sibling just because of what the relationship in their mind should have been and where the relationship had gone didn't align. And that happens a lot more common than not. And it's tough when it's internally in the family, in the home that you grew up in, because you have this idealization of what it should be and what kind of the quote unquote perfect family life is.
Right.
But and everyone's situation is different, and then when it goes left field, that's when you start looking at things a little differently and start questioning maybe your worth, yourself, what's going on, what's your purpose, where is this going to go, where's it going to lead. And so you start asking yourself these questions, and that's kind of how it started, I guess. But through the course of writing that piece, again, having conversations with other people that have their own family issues, and
Right.
not to get into their business, but just trying to understand kind of the relatable factors in that. And everyone has family, everyone has a mom and a dad,
Right.
whether you speak to them or not, everyone has that. And so everyone can relate to this piece of, at one point you had parents or a sibling that you interacted with, and through the course of your life and that journey, you or they decided that connection was no longer substantial or
Okay.
needed.
Right.
And so that's a tough pill to swallow. And so,
It
you
is.
kind of got to go through that process of it. And that's what incited me to write home. And so that's why I think it hits hard for a lot of people.
So did you like start like right out the gate just writing, or were you like wanting to perform this on stage like from get? How did
No,
how did that happen?
yeah, I never thought about the stage. I never
Really?
thought about the stage,
Wow.
not once, until my friend who's the owner of Lord of Ties, the soothing company. He saw again in that BlackBerry. I had all these poems I just written over the course of a year or 2 years, and it was a lot. And he's like, we shared it with each other, and he says, this is really good. You should share it. And I never thought about it until he said it, and then and then I just explored the option. But for me, writing is therapy, so it's always the go-to.
Sure.
It's to illustrate. Yeah, it's just kind of spill your thoughts on a piece of paper. And when I got to a point of I wanted to perform, I had to alter the process a little bit in terms of, instead of saying it's got to be about you and what you get from it.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Right.
because I want yeah, because when you're reading it, I don't want you to say, "Oh, Virus the poet thought this," or "Viral thought this."
Right, right, right.
It's gotta be for you, right? So, oh, what does this poem do for me, and how is it gonna help me, and what is it gonna make me think, and what can I achieve and grow from after this piece or pieces? And so that's why I always encourage everyone to go to virusthepoet.com, because there's so many poems there that
Right.
I've just put over the years. If you're not sold on the book, you can go to the Virus Poet, you can read and listen
The
and watch
YouTube channel
different
is really
poems.
good too. Yeah.
Thank you. And yeah, YouTube, I start posting on YouTube, TikTok, basically all social platforms. And just to give people that outlet. Then I thought of the idea to create the book, because I had enough pieces that I thought this would be great to share with the world.
Yeah, yeah. I love it. I mean, it's got to be scary though, right? It doesn't seem like you grew up with a performance kind of like stage orientation. And that
No,
freaks
yeah,
most people out.
yeah. I definitely had stage fright. I probably still do have stage fright.
But
I
stage
don't
fright
go.
is good. I mean, that means you're alive.
Yeah,
As
yeah,
long as you
yeah,
do it, right?
yeah.
As
It's
long as you get
terrifying
up
though.
there and get scared, feel that shit in your stomach and do it anyway, good on you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Been
No,
there, done
definitely.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it was definitely, I remember the first time I ever performed, I was shaking. Like literally my legs were shaking because
Sure.
one, I couldn't believe I was up there. And two, I was up there being vulnerable,
Yeah.
sharing poetry, which is just obviously a vulnerable thing in itself.
Right.
And then you don't know how people are going to take it, right? Luckily, I was in a safe space. I was at the Art Bar, which is the first place I ever performed. I love that place. It's in Toronto, and it's a poetry centric venue. So it
So
was
people
perfect for
are
me.
already doing this, right?
Yeah,
It's not
exactly,
it's
exactly.
not like
But
you're
still,
at the mall or something.
right, right. But even that, you still get stage for it because now you're like, okay, well, I got to go on stage, perform this piece that I wrote that I never thought anyone would ever hear or listen or watch, and now I got to do it. So you find yourself double questioning a little bit. Am I ready to go on stage, and is it the right thing? But ultimately, it was. And over time, over the years, I got better at stage presence and enunciation and
Sure.
performance and all that because you have to, right? You want to make sure that people hear what you're trying to share. And so when I do shows, I always say, close your eyes and open your ears because the whole point of my poetry is not about me. And I'm
Right.
just kind of a byproduct of it. I want you to listen to the poem itself. I want you to let the words marinate in your mind.
Right.
And that's where the power is in the words. And so that's what I try to do.
Nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a completely different, on the train and with your, crackberry,
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah. Yeah.
you in your head. Sure, maybe
Yeah.
you share it, right? But it's a different kind of thing when you're sitting there and it's like dark room. Okay, maybe I have a stool and a microphone and it's
Right.
just
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
scary. It's scary.
Very,
Yeah.
very. No,
Yeah.
definitely. And I do encourage anyone if they do want to perform, to start at the open mics and the smaller rooms,
Yeah.
get your exposure there and then slowly start building your way up. Because if you go from 0 to 100 real quick, it's terrifying for sure. And the worst part about it is if it's already terrifying and you don't perform well,
Right.
then you're more in your head and it
Totally.
creates this domino effect. So
Right.
that's what I would advise for sure.
It's almost like you're doing that therapy where you're doing the thing that you're afraid of to inoculate your brain. Okay,
Yeah,
I did it
exactly.
that time. I was almost going to pass out. Maybe next
Right,
time I'll
right.
feel a little bit better.
That's exactly it. Yeah, you hit it on the
You
head.
just need
Exactly.
reps. You need reps, baby.
You need practice. You
That's
need the
right.
10,000. You need the 10,000 hours, right? As they
That's right.
say.
That's right.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about like some of your most influential performances. I know you've been performing your poetry like all
Yeah.
over. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
when did this really like get some momentum for you?
That's a good question. I think when I performed in Miami is when I
Miami. Wow.
really, yeah, I performed in Miami
That's a pretty
at,
big stage.
yeah, it was at a speakeasy event. And it was great. It was the first time I performed outside of Canada, and that's when it kind of took off for me. When I was like, okay, I can do this at a different level,
Right.
and it's the message can be widespread enough, and the audience can be broad enough that they'll appreciate it. And that's when I think that's when that was the kind of catalyst for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you weren't freaking out anymore at that point.
I think at that point, it's funny because I was in a different city. I don't know anyone.
Right.
So for me, I was just like, fuck it. Let's just do it.
Totally. I get
Let's
that.
do
Yeah.
it,
Yeah. I don't
And
know any of these people.
I don't know anyone. So I'm gonna put my best foot forward and shoot for the stars and
Yeah. Yeah.
hopefully,
Yeah.
I land on Mars and that's it and see
I
where
get
it
it.
goes.
I get it. I
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little. Poetry is motion. So
Yes, sir.
talk a little bit about like the title and where you're
Yeah.
going with that.
Sure, sure. So it's kind of a play on words. So I'm a big basketball fan, and I'm not sure if you are, but in basketball they say poetry in motion, right? That you see someone like LeBron James, let's say for example, carrying the ball, or Steph Curry shooting the ball. So that's kind of a play on words. That's where it started to develop from. But for me, of course, poetry is my therapy, and I know it carries forward for a lot of people. But poetry in itself can create emotion quote unquote, for you
Right.
in whether it's your motivation, your mentality, your being, how you interact, how you deal with situations. And so for me, that was important to illustrate. So poetry is motion, mind, body, and soul, because I'm my religion is Hindu, and so
Wow.
I follow Hinduism, and so mind, body, and soul is all interconnected, and so I want to kind of portray that with the book, and again, mind, body, and soul is very accurate with what the book is because relatability, right? We all have all three of these things, and
Right.
everything we go through, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, it's impacting these three factors or these three items, and so that was just the way my brain processed it.
I love it. It's great.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
again, you got like universal themes, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You got
Yeah, no, and it speaks to all that, right? Like relationships are a big
everybody's
one.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say like a relationship is a big one, not even romantic, but relationship with friends and family. That's gonna, yeah, everyone has those experiences throughout the course of their life.
Right.
And so that will shape you to a certain degree. And so in this book, I speak a little bit about that. And some people will appreciate it and like it because maybe they're going through that. Maybe they're going through a depression. Maybe they're really happy and everything's going well. Maybe their job or their career is not going as great as it can be, but
Right.
maybe they've traveled and now they've got this new gust of wind and second lease on life, right? So there's
Right.
different emotions that I evoke through this book, and it's relatable.
Totally. Everybody goes through these things that you're talking about, like,
Yeah.
fear, grief, loss,
Yes.
love,
Yes.
right? So,
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
you couldn't get more relatable.
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
and it's important to be authentic with it too. And so that when I write, I write from a very authentic place. Kind of pour out the emotions, be as raw and real as possible, and that will translate a lot better than you being trying to be a little too prim and proper. And I think there's a degree you have to have, obviously, put your best foot forward, but you
right.
also want to be unapologetically you,
Right.
um if it's not rubbing a lot of people the wrong way, but you also want to help others, and so that's kind of what I try to achieve in this book.
I love it.
Yeah.
So,
It's a good read. It's a good read. It's something to, a lot of people are not into poetry. Let's be honest. Let's call it spade a spade. A lot of people are not
I mean,
huge in
they
poetry.
are into poetry. They just don't know it, right? They're
Right.
listening to
Okay.
music, right? And they're
Yeah.
listening
Yeah,
to
absolutely. So
hip
it's a
hop.
different
Yeah.
channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a different channel of poetry for sure. But just to take a poetry book and sit down and open it and read it, not many people do it. So
Right.
that's why I have the hard book, I have the Kindle version, and of
Sure.
course social media, so that I try to bring it to
You
you in
make it like a
different ways.
multimedia kind of. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And I'm also with my poems, and I can't speak to others, but for mine, I make sure they're under 2 minutes or less, because
I get it.
I am aware of, our attention spans have shrunk since social media,
Right.
and it plays a big factor today. And so I want to be able to portray a message, like you said
Right.
earlier in the pod, which is, you have a message to say, you have something to speak to and a topic to talk about. But I don't want to lecture. I
Right.
really want to give you some insight, some information,
It's a
and
fine
hopefully
line.
you
It's a
gain
fine
something from
line.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a
Exactly.
fine line because nobody wants to sit and, okay, teacher, I'll take notes now. That's
Right, right. Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Some do, but
Yeah.
majority don't.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's just you're right. There's so many things working against poetry in our current scheme. So I think it's a
Mhm.
good idea to keep it under 2 minutes.
Right,
Like
right,
later
exactly.
on, you can always write like, Iliad and the Odyssey if you want to.
Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Something a lot longer for sure.
Epic. I remember I read, it was kind of like, I don't know who it was by. It was called Ithacas.
Okay.
And it was in English 101 when I took my college English 101. And it was a relatively short poem. You can go
Okay.
Google it.
Mhm.
Not as short as yours, but
Right.
interestingly, it was like about a page,
Got
maybe
you.
like 6 or 7 stanzas, right?
Sure, sure.
And I read it, and the instructor was like, "Okay, what's this about?" Right? And it just jumped out at me like right away, right? I was like, "Oh,
Right.
this is about life." right? This poem is
Yeah.
about life.
Yeah.
And nobody else in the class picked that up, right? So they were like, "Oh, it's about this adventure and it's about this Greek guy." They're very much like just reading the lines, And I'm like,
For sure.
and it's not like I'm right. It's not like I'm right,
Yeah.
but it's like for whatever reason, it spoke to me differently than the rest of the class, and that's what's cool about poetry, I think.
I think that's what's great about art in general. Like you go to a museum, you see a painting, and it
Nobody's
speaks.
wrong about whatever it says
Right,
to them.
right,
Yeah.
right, exactly, right. And so with poetry, it's the same thing, right? You picked up life from that scenario, and others just read it for what it was, right? And some
Right.
people stay on the surface, others get a little deeper, right? So
Right.
no one's wrong. It's just the way you process is the way you want to. And so you gotta cater to yourself and your needs. And with poetry, that's what we try to do is evoke emotion
Right.
and pull on those heartstrings and get some thought through you, and also maybe help you get through some dark times.
Right. Let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that. Did you like use your actual life experiences to like craft these things? So
Yes.
your own love, your own fear, your own love,
Yeah.
loss, all
So
those things.
Yeah, so the good thing about the way I write, it's not always personal to me. So a lot of
Okay.
situations, some I have gone through absolutely, but others it's sometimes observing from afar or having a conversation with a colleague or family or
Right.
friend and learning about what they're gone through, and it just started to spark an idea. Other times it could be as simple as watching a TV show or movie, and that triggered something.
Oh,
Or going
nice.
to an event, and interacting with some new people. And yeah, so I think for me it's not all personal towards me. Not all these poems are specific to me and my experiences. Some are, sure, but the majority are more just observations and experiences and conversations and
Right.
things I've learned throughout the course of my journey and meeting different people of different walks of life. And so again, that's why it's so relatable, because it's not all about me, because I haven't gone through every single experience in the world, right?
Right.
But
Most
other
people
people
haven't.
have gone.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But other people have gone through experiences that I haven't. So when I hear certain stories that I watch, observe them go through certain things, it starts to get my brain working, and so I got to write about it. And I don't expose, of course, anyone's situation, but I put it in a way where I know if you're going through it, someone else in the world of 8 billion people are probably going through something
Sure.
similar,
Oh
you
yeah,
know?
totally.
Yeah.
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 And that's probably a good thing for your own like personal well-being. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it was Kevin Smith, the director.
Yeah.
He told this story about how like for the longest time when he wanted to write a movie, he always just like used a piece of his life, and that was the only way he knew how to do it. He was like,
Right.
I ripped
Right.
all this crap out of me and threw it on paper.
Yeah.
And I kept doing that. And then he was like, wait a minute, I can just make shit up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, because I think that's probably the best way to start, though, is to speak on your own experience. So, because draw
Totally.
from
Yeah, because you
personal
have it.
beliefs,
It's there.
because you
Yeah.
have it, right? But over the course of time, as you get better at things, or you get better at your art, you could start improvising and developing maybe a thought. These are where movies come from, right? Movies happen because
Right.
the writer had ideas, not because maybe sometimes they've gone through personal things.
Right.
But I doubt the writer of Predator ever had an alien encounter that they're like, "Yo, I got to write about this." Maybe that's a whole different conversation. But it's
Yeah.
creativity, and let your
Yeah. Yeah.
creativity flow. And
Yeah.
I've always been creative since I was a child, and so with poetry, yeah, I definitely tapped into a little bit more of that. So sometimes it'll have nothing to do with me. Sometimes it's super abstract, and I'll just have a thought, and it'll just spill out,
Right.
and I just write, and I don't even think about it. And sometimes I write poems in a minute or two. Sometimes it takes
Wow.
me weeks, sometimes months. Yeah,
Right.
so
Right.
it just depends what kind of zone I'm in, and sometimes it's a personal experience that triggers that, and sometimes I'm just being I'm feeling creative, and I want to take advantage of it.
I get it. And I
Yeah.
bet you probably upped your phone game.
My phone game. Yeah. Well, I had to get good apps. I had to get a good memo pad for sure. Not the BlackBerry anymore.
So what sort of influences did you like tap into when you first started like writing your own poetry?
When I first started writing my poetry, I was in university, I was at college, so I was writing about the experiences of that time, right? Of course,
Okay.
this was a long time ago, so 2010, 2011.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So 2012, 2013. So I started writing about that time and where I was in life and, the friends and family that I had at that time and, going through, still finding yourself. You're super young, you don't know
Right.
what you want to do for the rest of your life. And you don't know what it's going to evolve into. And you're thinking the worst things and you're also thinking the best things. And so you just write about that. So the influences at that time was very musically influenced. So
Makes
I was
sense.
listening, I was listening to a lot of hip hop and R&B and top 40 music. And so, yeah, just kind of go, you always remember the song that played in your most traumatic times, but also the
Oh,
best
wow.
times of your life,
Sure.
right? And so you kind of use that to write, and it influences you in a different way.
I get it.
Yeah.
I know I was very bummed on a deployment.
Yeah, I
And
can imagine.
well, it wasn't like horrible. Don't get me wrong. It was just like if I told the story, it would be more funny, right?
Right, okay.
Yeah. So I mean, like, I was in Saudi Arabia for like 59 days,
Wow.
and
How was that?
it sucked.
Yeah. Okay.
But it didn't
Why
suck.
did it suck? Outside of the fact that you're going to war, of
Yeah.
course. What was
So
it? Was it the fear? Was it like I might get killed?
no, none of those things.
Okay.
So it was
Okay.
just like I had I was an E7, so a tech sergeant, and there
Okay.
was a senior airman, right?
Mhm.
And she was like an E4. Okay, so she's my subordinate, right?
Sure.
And she's
Sure.
just like, I don't know how she got to like, because she had to be in for like, I don't know, 3-4 years already or more. I don't know, ish,
Right.
right?
Sure. Sure.
And she had like zero like military skills. People would like come in and say, "Hey, I need some help with whatever," right? And she would just say, "That's not my job," and leave.
Oh shoot.
Right. And then that person would come yell at me.
Fun. Fun.
And then my boss didn't want to do anything about it other than yell at her. And I was like, we've already yelled at her so many times, right? So
Yeah.
finally, I convinced them to, write a little letter, right? That said,
Yeah.
you were bad in Air Force Ease, right? And,
Yeah.
and then I told her, I was like, okay, I'm just going to put this in my desk. And if you're a good airman from now on, I'll throw it away.
Right. Right.
But if this happens again, if somebody yells at me because of you, I'm sending that to your home commander. And she's like, you can't do that. And I'm like, I think I can. and
Tough.
she
That's tough.
she was better. Yeah. But
Well, it worked out.
it worked. Yes.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. That
during
must have been.
that time, and I was very stressed out, there was this song playing
Yeah.
at the time. And I can't remember the song. I'm blanking on it, but
Sure.
it was what got me through.
Yeah. So if you hear that song today, it would remind you of that time.
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Right,
Which is
right.
the great thing about music, right? Because it brings you back to a place in time.
It's the modern poetry,
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
have poetry. It's just set to music, right?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, that's so I started doing that. So I don't have a musical ability for sure. But so
You
what
don't
I
really need a
started
musical ability anymore.
Yes, yeah, that's yeah. So what I started doing is started put one of my friends. He's a rapper in Toronto, one of the best. His name is Brown Boy, but he actually told me, he said, your poetry is great, but add some music to the background, add some sort of melody in the back. It will give it a little bit of an oomph to it. And I never thought about it before. And
Yeah,
so when
why
he said
not?
it, yeah, when he said it, I said, oh shoot, okay, let me try it. And I did it, and I think it was probably the best advice I ever got from a poetry standpoint because it took it to the next level. Because now you have this music, like when you watch a movie, let's say you watch Freddy vs. Jason, and now you hear this
Yeah,
music, right? You hear music about like an intense scene coming up,
sure.
then it kind of prepares you for it, right?
Right.
So you're like, oh, something's coming,
That's
or
right.
something you hear, I don't know, you watch a movie and like a happy song comes on, you're like, okay, this seems to be like a good moment,
Right.
and it kind of gets you prepared for it. And so for what I start to do is put instrumentals and melodies into my poetry, when I'm creating videos or content or music, or not
Nice.
music, but albums.
Yeah.
And it just took it to the next level, and it helps the listener get to that place in their mind, and then
Totally.
you start with the words, and hopefully it provides some insight. But yeah, it took it to the next level for sure.
The music, we're all programmed by TV and movies to like
Yeah.
get that like that dramatic build, the tension,
Yeah, yeah,
tension,
yeah.
tension, 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 release.
Yeah.
That's
It's like Lord of the Rings, before
totally.
battle, it just
Yeah,
escalates more and more.
that's right. That's right. It's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
how
yeah.
do we build tension here? And I would
Right,
imagine
right.
you're building tension in your poetry.
Yes,
It's
and
all
with the
part of the
music,
program. Yeah.
exactly. And it was a great learning curve for me because it definitely amplified it, right? If I'm talking about maybe a topic that's very deep, like I don't know, depression, for example, and then
Mm,
you put some music that's a little more somber, then it
right.
adds a little bit of an element to it where the listener, watcher, or reader is like, oh, okay, you're putting yourself in that situation, into that
Right.
experience.
It,
So I
the
think it
music
helps.
helps you get the feeling beyond the word. It's almost like
Yes.
it's almost
Yeah.
like there's a message in between the lines, like we were saying
Right.
before. The music
Right.
can
Right.
definitely help just like
Yeah.
elicit the emotion.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
amazing.
Yeah,
So like
man.
the sky's the limit, man. You could be collabing with Kanye before you know
Hopefully one day, one day. I don't know if I'm at that level, but never know what can
it.
happen.
That would be cool.
Yeah, it would be very cool, very
So
dope,
I've been
very dope.
saying your name wrong. So say your name. Is it Viral?
Viral,
Viral.
viral.
Okay,
Yeah,
Viral.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, not viral.
yeah.
Okay, my bad.
Not viral, not like the viral infection. Although that's where virus the quote came from. Virus. So because the viral infection,
Right,
and so I took the play on of that word, of the English version of that, which is a viral infection, and
right.
put it on its head. Slapped it sideways and said, okay, now I'm going to turn a negative into a positive, and now I'm
Hell yeah.
virus the poet.
Yeah, yeah.
So it
But
works. It works for
Virus
me.
the Poet is like it's pretty sick because
Yeah.
it's like you're taking this
Thank you.
bad thing that people don't
Right.
want, but you're making a mind virus to heal the world, right? So
Yeah, you know what?
I like it.
When I knew it was a good name is when after a show, someone came up to me and said, they said, oh, it was good. I caught the virus, and I was like, oh, that's pretty good. That's
Oh,
pretty
see?
good. I might have to put that on a shirt.
I caught the virus.
Yeah, it was good. It was good.
That's
I like
amazing.
it.
That's
Yeah.
so. What's coming up for Virus the Poet? What's your future projects?
Well, future plans, for sure, is probably a book number two. Hopefully, that's on the way at some point. In the process of creating a new album. I'm
Wow.
gonna drop that, and then just continue to write and put content out. And I do a lot of poetic pictures. So similar to the music, I will create a poem, and then I'll use a picture that I've taken or someone I know have taken, and kind of merge the two, because the picture is also going to speak to the poem, and you're going to get some reference pieces out of it,
Right.
and hopefully again it will elicit some emotion through that. So
Mm,
I love doing though. I just like being creative, and I think
totally.
it's a good outlet. I think everyone on the planet needs a few things, which is, you need a hobby, you need something that gets you moving, an activity, something that
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
mental release. For me and for a lot of people, poetry is that avenue. So I think it's great, and it helps a lot of people.
Totally. That's amazing. So
Yeah,
let's
man.
talk a little bit about how people can find Virus the Poet. We already
Absolutely.
know virusthepoet.com. What else you got going on
Yes.
out there?
Yeah. So at Virus the Poet on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. What am I missing? TikTok. Yeah. So those are the ways to get in touch with me. But again, viruspoet.com is the best way.
That's
But yeah,
the hub, the hub of the
yeah, that's the
virus if you
hub.
want to get infected.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And there's a lot on there. There's a lot of pieces on there.
Yeah.
If people, again, after this podcast, they're not sold yet, hopefully will be. But if you're not, head over to virusport.com and scroll through the 100 plus pieces that you can, read, listen, watch, share with family, friends, colleagues,
Yeah.
whoever. And I guarantee you will not be disappointed. There is something in there for everyone.
Check it out.
Check it out.
I don't know what to call you now. Viral?
Yeah, Viral, or what I go, Virus the Poet is
Virus
always
the
good.
poet. That'll work.
Yeah,
This has
yeah,
been a
yeah.
blast, man.
Yeah, man, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking to you for sure.
All right. You have a good one.
You too. Take care.
Thanks for taking the time to ride along with us on another episode of Vroom Vroom Veer. For podcast info and show notes, be sure to head over to vvveer.com. That's VVER.com. Man, that's fun to say. And we'll catch up with you next time here on Vroom Vroom Veer.